Every organization needs someone who can take charge and lead them to greatness. Someone who knows when it's time to put their foot down when a subordinate gets out of line, who's also gentle enough to not be perceived as overbearing. The world of fiction in some way, shape, or form has given us an astounding number of them, and there's no doubt in my mind that Optimus Prime is indeed one of them. For over 40 years, this noble truck has led his fleet of automobiles, hovercrafts, and dinosaurs against this evil gun who had to become a tank because it wasn't culturally appropriate in his group of planes, mutant animal monsters, and cassette tapes. It was a concept of ass-kicking proportions, as during that same time, toy companies Takara and especially Hasbro supplied him with a large amount of revisions in fictional and physical form that coincidentally enlightened people for better or worse. While my personal collection isn't as big as a specific blue rat's, it's not exactly minibot sized. With that being said, I hope your day is going well, because in this video, 9 months in the making, it's time to sit back and roll out as I'll be reviewing every Optimus Prime figure I own.
Oh my god!
A few things to note before we get started. I'll be going through these in release order while also replacing some figures with newer iterations, because in some cases, vintage and complete is expensive. While the word complete is on my mind, a few of these guys are going to be incomplete because in some cases, accessories and broken parts are just as expensive as getting the figure complete. Orion packs, Nemesis, and Shatterglass Prime will be included, but Primal, his upgrades, Leo Convoy, and Big Convoy won't because they're all separate characters. This rule also applies to Ultra Magnus with 3 key exceptions. All of these are going to be trucks with one huge exception, and finally, Hasbro, Takara, and anyone who collaborates with them only. X-Transbots? Pfft, more like transparently hard to convert. Mastermind Creations Optispexis? More like Masters of the Get Outta Here. Light of Peace? Pfft, more like lightweight piece of crap.
You don't get, I'm not gonna beat you up. I'm gonna you up, bro. Where the are you?
All right,
where are you?
Come find
Where
me,
is
bitch.
he?
So without further ado, what better place to start with than Grandpa Battle Convoy himself? Generation 1 Optimus Prime. More precisely, the Generation 2 reissue missing everything. Which is a-okay for me because this was always going to be a souvenir in the best possible way. Being that ever so classic flat-nosed truck, every version of this character to come after is going to emulate this in some way, shape, or form. That goes double for that oh-so-eloquent conversion. Some might say it's a little too simplistic for a supposed great Autobot leader. However, I must remind those people that in terms of shape-shifting robots, this was one of the first of its kind. It shouldn't be complicated for the sake of being complicated, and the fact that the robot mode looks this good while others of the time frame are middling at best is astonishing. Though if you're looking for on-point cartoon accuracy, you're not gonna find it here because 1, the show is inaccurate to itself at some points, and 2, this guy along with the rest of Season 1's cast came out a whole year before the cartoon's inception. So in reality, every Prime after this guy should be scrutinized for being inaccurate to Mr. Battle Convoy over here. But the cartoon was such a major success, Japan murdered Diaclone in favor of Cybertron's finest. While I do prefer what would become the definitive version of this character's head, I appreciate the shape and structure of this guy. Mr. Battle Convoy is also pretty posable for something that came out in the early 80s. Sure, he won't be able to tango with modern figures, but he shouldn't be counted out because of it. However, if you require more articulation and refuse to get any modern Prime because you're a bitter Diaclone fan, Takara decided to give him the articulation he well deserved in the form of Missing Link Optimus Prime in the style of that evil cartoon design and the original toy. Now this is a figure I don't own because of the rumored at the time 86 Optimus Prime. But luckily, as an answer to, I think, this figure, Marclonus & Co. decided to throw its low-income juggernauts a bone in the form of the Legacy Deluxe class G1 toy Optimus Prime. While this guy is a perfect adaptation of Mr. Battle Convoy, he should have stayed in the oven for a few more minutes. For starters, he's definitely shorter than the average Deluxe. This has been a growing issue with certain figures, but I personally don't mind it when it comes to characters like Bumblebee and Cliffjumper. When it comes to Optimus, his older figure is on equal footing with most Deluxes, so I'm ashamed this new guy wasn't given the same treatment. Transforming him is also on par with a few extra steps, though his legs are now a pain to tab in, and you have to be super careful with these struts the hands are on as they will snap off if you push them too hard. The truck mode itself is a fine duplication, but it looks and especially feels like it got parked on the wrong side of town. Also not a huge fan of his axe. It's not a horrible addition, it just feels and looked like one of those third-party upgrades that also needed more time to cook properly. His gun and clear blue matrix are neat, however, and there's one positive that outweighs the barrage of negatives. That would be the limitless posing that makes Grandpa Battle Convoy shed a tear, as he's never been so proud of his grandson. He doesn't exactly reach baby daddy status, but whatever you can think of, he can do it with ease. Overall, the Generation 1 Optimus Battle Convoy is a great display piece that represents the starting point of a brand, even if he technically wasn't the first figure. If the first ever figure of grown-up Orion packs is something you desire, then he's super easy to find if his multiple re-releases are a sign. But if you require more posing and the missing link is off limits due to price, then the Legacy Deluxe Prime should be right up your alley. Unfortunately, thanks to the many delays of this video, he's now in this weird limbo where he's too old to be found on store shelves normally, and he's too new to be stocked cause all the kid-focused crap from 2022 haven't sold yet. Needless to say, eBay's your friend. But no matter the situation or cost, they're both pretty fantastic. Which is sadly not the case for his upgrade.
I've fallen, and I can't get up!
Okay, that's not fair to say, as he marks the first and not the last time Optimus will receive a super mode. Unfortunately, it's also the first time where not owning all the components to a figure is gonna run over your enthusiasm. But first, I have to say, he finally has the head the character is known for despite having Decepticon contacts. And the base mode is not as bad as snooty people might think. Oh really, I kind of wish this was used as an Autobot base in some form of media, as it comprises of detail that I find to be extravagant. Same goes for the weaponry, which I don't have with the exception of one double barrel cannon because my copy is $10 used. So Siege Jetfire's cannon it is. Converting is a loud endeavor, but not a complicated one, as we're technically still on year 3 of doing our own thing. However, before we get to super mode, we need to convert the cab with the Power Master, a little bot that turns into an engine block to allow the robot to transform. Which I don't have because my copy is $10 used, so pushing in the grill with your finger it is. And just look at that oh so fine broken niece that stops you from getting the super mode to look like it's supposed to, because my copy is 10 minus 5 decades old and rusted, so the foot joint became so tight it snapped one day. So after 2 seconds of not trying to cut your hand, we now get to the issue of the missing head because Control-C, Control-V, and I only have 4 options for the super mode. A, turn him around so his broken leg turns into a defensive knife but no longer makes the truck cab the defining feature, which is the whole goddamn point of the design. B, leaving it alone and pretending the head is visible even though pretending is not this toy's gimmick. C, 3D print a new head along with the rest of the missing accessories for the other primes. Or D, replacing the main bot entirely. Sure, this now means the trailer is missing an owner, but Grandpa Battle Convoy is missing some hands and firepower. This still won't fix the missing Power Master problem, but they need each other more than ever. Well, at least until Earthrise Prime comes in for a state-required weekend time. This is one of those figures that absolutely needs to be complete if you're gonna fully enjoy him. Granted, a lot of his issues are my own fault, as I should have found what I needed before making this, but in reality I also needed that money to buy these 7 Jokers, and even if that wasn't the case, a lot of late era G1 toys suffer this fate, may it be yard sales or genuine carelessness. Not throwing shade at the guy I bought this from, cause I clearly knew what I was getting, and heck, if you have all the components or replacement ones in general, then Power Godmaster Genrai Prime makes a wild display piece just like his previous incarnation. However, if you're not in the mood to treasure hunt, then you're not missing out, as I believe there's an even better super mode Prime in the not too distant future. But before we get to that, now this is technically my second time talking about this thing, however the first time felt incomplete. In fact, that entire video felt incomplete, but that's a problem for future me. So what do you get when you take the original Laser Prime and scale him and his weapon system down a tad bit, while also ejecting him with a bad attitude? A glorious black paint job that's doing a terrible job at representing the guy he wants to be but is still great in its own right, and a corrupted matrix of leadership, a bloodthirsty psychopath with a clear red sword, a trash can lid on a stick, seriously this thing can take a hike, shoulder-mounted missile pods, these don't have to take a hike, and a battle-ready trailer that folds out to reveal a rotating cannon and a cock-a-doodle-doo taser. Sadly, his posing is a bit limited because unlike the original, his shoulder pods are stationary and the arms are mounted below them. They could look dynamic in certain configurations, but others would no doubt look less troublesome if the shoulders just emulated the original. The transformation is also a bit lackluster as the legs are recycled from Earthrise Prime, which were a neutered down version of the Siege Prime's legs. There are some parts of enjoyment, but a lot will require a bit of squeezing. Also, this random flap that gives the backpack oddly adorable jetpack detail, more useless than a school brand ice pack after getting run over by the real life version of the Assault mode. Being the first Prime to forgo the regular flat nose, he becomes a demonic oil tanker that makes the other demonic oil tanker look like a chump because he is one.
Oh, come on, ref!
Seriously, who needs badges from fallen opponents or edgelord flames when you can have slick blue streaks? Honestly, from my 3 years of owning the Legacy version and from copious amount of reviews online, I can perfectly say the original mold in red, white, or black has better posability and features that will make the asking price more convincing. Especially thanks to budget cuts making the Legacy version lose a few. Now, a higher budget won't fix the wrong as hell paint job on Nemesis Scourge Prime over here. But even if that were the case, I still prefer this deco because the red is just too delicious. So if you want something more accurate to Car Robot's Black Convoy, then the old G mold is the one to get. However, for those on a tighter budget, the Legacy revision in red, black with a hint of toy hacks, toxic, or disappointment is an overall fine alternative. Spy Changer Scourge is also a great alternative, but only if you don't give 2/3 of a damn about sizing and pathetically easy conversions. I do when it comes to certain characters, and yet I find this slightly better than the Legacy even if he forgoes the oil tank and most of the articulation of his larger counterpart. However, transforming figures this small were barely escaping the 90s, so expecting advanced movement out of such an adorable package is a fool's errand. Plus his main purpose is to fit in with any Hot Wheels you have lying around. Hate him for his size alone, but if he dies in the street you'll feel extremely bad. Or not, he is an inanimate object with no feelings. Look, if you get him on the aftermarket or at a toy show, you won't be disappointed. Oh boy, let me tell you, this thing and me had a real history together. So initially I skipped out on this guy's first release because I was moving apartments at the time and I didn't want to bog myself down with new figures that year. But luckily, a year and a half later, he was given a reissue and I was quick to pre-order it. And canceled it 2 months later because Big Bad Toy Store was taking too long to ship it and because of 2 other figures that demanded what little money I had. But that didn't stop me recently from putting a 3-month payment plan on it on Amazon because future me isn't. But he is a smart one, as now I have no choice but to berate my past self for rejecting this glorious piece of plastic way too many times. His vehicle form is an unrealistic army truck in every sense of the word, but can still hurt anyone or anything that gets run over by it, while also blasting around the area to distract them. Sure, these 2 aren't technically his, but Power God Genrai won't be needing them where he's going. But even without the cannons from another commander, this beefcake of a trailer is loaded with firepower and can convert into a bait to scare off anyone dumb enough to rear-end it. Yes, the base may be inaccurate to how it looked in the show or the original toy, but oddly enough it looks better than what the lower half of a giant robot doing the splits would normally look like. But if the default isn't to your liking, it can be configured into other modes if you so desire. I personally use the Prime Recliner if I'm not going straight to Super Mode. Transforming the cab is a preschool-like affair. It's up to the individual in question if this is a bad thing or not, however, Prime himself is slightly disappointing when it comes to action positions. It's not an abysmal sight, however, those shoulders will make you wonder if he's truly comfortable in his own body, and the chest will split open at the worst intervals. But I must say, his Shogun-like aesthetic is well painted, his matrix is quite unique compared to the others, and if he loses his oversized buster, he's equipped with arm cannons, so more firepower for him. Super Mode conversion requires you to push a specific button on the main robot and wait as the trailer slowly shapes itself into giant legs. Is what I would say if this was the original, because the Legacy figure requires more steps but is hyper satisfying once everything comes together. Instead of a loud and demonic you get majestic clicks and clats as the ratchets create a monolith so beautiful I must ask the people who think the original is better because of the gimmicks. What type of cocaine are you smoking, and can I have some? Because this looks hell of a lot better than that poorly managed construction site y'all call a figure. Especially with that oh-so intuitive posability not even the healthiest of bodybuilders could ever achieve. Though the left leg on mine is a bit loose, so that makes me do a double take, along with the position on the head, and this back skirt is constantly in the way. However, at the end of the day, what complaints I do have can inflict a stain on what I believe is one of the best figures of the current decade, as the Commander class Autobots are still running strong. So if you want a great Optimus Prime and or have a passive-aggressive attitude towards G1, even though it came before and gets more respect, money, and bitches than you'll ever have, but you do you, then I can't recommend Legacy Armada Prime enough, especially with a second chance at retail life with another one hopefully on the way. Super Energon Link Grand Prime is a replacement Megazord toy I wish I had instead of the Deluxe you could only find in specific multi-packs and an individual release in Japan. Yeah, I just exposed my cards early, but the second time I went to transform this thing, the right foot snapped off thanks to the joint being made out of clear plastic, and now he's become a figure I regret buying at a toy convention when there was clearly a better option in the same damn bin as him. I didn't even push the stupid joint that hard, it's just that clear plastic limbs are evil, and I thank God they don't come around as much anymore. But even without that fact affecting the assessment, I still wouldn't recommend him, as if you don't have another Energon Deluxe, the shirt and pants mode are gonna be like this thing's standing ability after the right foot snapped off. Worthless as hell. But even after that, these modes feel like they spit out more ugly vibes than a cat in mating season. As for the truck transformation and bot mode, they're alright. Since Super Energon Link took place on the 20th anniversary of the franchise, Grand Prime is essentially G1 Prime with more details, though the final result is perplexing. Now, I could make 100 fat jokes, but then I'd be no better than those. Plus, Super Energon Link is where the toys and the 3D models had equal synergy. In being shit, that is. Sure, this thing is shiny and the clicks of the ratchets are absolute ear candy, but because the limbs are made out of such a fragile material and the overall package being worthless without another Energon Deluxe, just flip it the bird and never look back. Fun fact, weeks after editing that portion and getting this thing back in the proper vehicle mode, the other foot broke, so now this is officially a useless piece of shit. There's no real way to talk about this next figure without somebody asking about the base mold, so Siege Ultra Magnus represented the start of a new system for leader class that didn't pan out quite well, as his retooled Galaxy upgrade Optimus Prime and Shockwave shelf-warmed to hell and back, so Hasbro had no choice but to resort to actually ginormous sized characters. They were definitely underappreciated, especially this version of Magnus, as his truck mode, while being a fantastic homage to RID-01 Magnus, wasn't a real car carrier. You can place a car or two on top, but the middle, not so much. Still, I personally think this looks badass, and it's a shame that it got modified into a giant piece of executive shit disguised as a Nerf truck. But hey, it made for a dead ringer for Cybertron Prime's fire truck mode, especially thanks to these giant water/laser cannons. However, some, including myself, will call foul to the exposed Superbo head thanks to the armor gimmick, and before we get to that, stock transformation footage starts with stripping the back half of the truck like a banana, and performing baby's first conversion on the front. The bot modes in default are athletically overweight, which is an aesthetic that kind of works for Optimus. Helps that these guys aren't made out of 80% clear plastic, and the heads are on point for the cartoon. Okay, not really. Magnus being a white Prime clone wouldn't become official until the early 2000s in terms of fiction, and Galaxy Prime's default mode doesn't look like this. Oh well, let's hope this eventually gets used for an Earth mode retool of the normal Siege Prime. Getting their true form requires breaking the trailer into several parts so they can be attached like a muscle suit. This is super satisfying to do as everything sandwiches in this Iron Man suitcase-like fashion, not to mention how effective clipping everything onto just Magnus is. Galaxy Prime is a bit more clunky thanks to the clip in the chest being too short, but most of my issues retain to going back into fire engine mode, as the shoulder pieces always confuse me. this hinge and the arm protection being too tight of a connection, and these clips being more frustrating than on the Magnus thanks to these weird cuts so you can never place them in on the first try. Fully armored Magnus may feel and look compressed, however, there are some elements I prefer here compared to the 86. Mainly his arms, which feels normal to handle instead of ones of the monkey variety, so now the silhouette is also passable, and his calves doesn't flex as easily. If you're not fond of the fact that he doesn't have his aviators, then I suppose you could buy that crap retool from Kingdom and replace the top section, but then you'd be wasting money on that dumpster fire, so forget I said anything. Articulation is way too basic even for the standards set at the time, as figures below his size class are able to perform much better poses. Not to say he can't perform them, but the armor can't be the only thing restricting him, cause Control-C, Control-V for when he's disarmored. Galaxy Prime is on the border of a perfect recreation. Just need to take into consideration that his feet are completely wrong as a result of him being a retool, the cannons on the legs causes clearance issues for the cannons he wants to use, and the super mode head is lacking pain in obvious spots. Otherwise, Prime's most badass reinterpretation still soars to heights the competition wishes it could in terms of looks. Repeat everything I said for Magnus's articulation, but in reality, you're not using armor like this for mobility. Instead, you're using it to blow up a fucking mountain with your enemies on top of it while ignition bursts on the loudest speaker you can find. Siege Magnus doesn't get the respect he truly deserves. He's definitely a super parts former, but in some ways I feel like he does a few things better than the 86 Magnus. Not denouncing the 86, I just prefer the vibe of the Siege for being unique. If you want to know the same feeling but you're in need of an Earth mode Magnus, then just get the 86. The Kingdom ain't worth junk if you value your wallet insanity, and no cosplaying as Skeletor won't save you. The regular Siege, if he's somewhat clean or extra dirty because he's dead, is an easy recommendation if you can find either on eBay. Galaxy Upgrade Prime, on the other hand, is a fine alternative if the Cybertron Optimus is just outside of your financial range, or if you don't feel like treasure hunting for broken pieces. But in the end, they're underrated figures that are definitely worth your time, and I wish I got over Prime while he was on sale. God damn it. This next figure is quite special, as he's a pioneer for a subline that would grow into the generations we know today. But first, the Deluxe class figure that was released in a 2-pack with Megatron and a Unicron Trilogy recap DVD. Everybody rejoice as I finally have an old figure that actually comes with all of his accessories. Because the only thing he comes with is this Mafia-style gun, which doesn't feel appropriate for the character, nor does this big-eyed head, which feels like it came off of a chibi figure. He has simple posing and an annoyingly loose waist because of the stupidly addicting action gimmick, which doesn't help the conversion at all. However, I must give it props for doing something I wish all G1-style Primes would do, and having these wheel sections fold up to become the rest of his torso. Doesn't lead to the greatest of truck modes, but a tolerable one. Also, gun turret on the back. That's not how reality works. Just use your imagination in cases like this, cause, he's not a bad Prime to get, but I'm always going to recommend the Classics Voyager over him at any opportunity. Like right now. Generation 1 may have been back, but we weren't in the age where everything had to look exactly like it. In Prime's case, his alt mode is definitely that flat nose we're accustomed to. However, it's an absolute beast of a modern take I'm ashamed never got adapted into animated form. No, really, I can see it now. In the final episode of this CGI mini-sequel series to Generation 1, Prime could be speeding over to Megatron for their final battle while running Starscream and Ramjet over the process going, "Now we know how Frost feels!" It looked terrible, but be so awesome, don't lie. His conversion is the type that takes no effort to get through, but it doesn't insult your intelligence, as I believe newer Transformers fans could get this done on their first try. Assuming they don't watch a bunch of reviews in the same week their parents get them in on eBay. Copy and paste everything I just said about the truck mode, cause there is nothing else I can say to insult this except for the windows on the arms are a major concern for most people, even if they work as makeshift shield, especially when you lose the anime as smokestack guns and the windshield that can also turn into a gun. Yes, I am ignoring the overabundance of yellow and the fact that the windows in question are made out of clear plastic. Just look at what you could do with this man. I ain't describing it, y'all got eyes. Sorry, not sorry, blind people, but this was from 2006. Why is he on the same level as modern figures? This is, wow. Okay, maybe I over-exaggerated on his posability, and the Deluxe is clearly superior in terms of the exact look of Optimus. However, the Voyager has more worth in terms of transformation, articulation, action features, and the overall styles on what came before it. No doubt if I discovered Transformers before 2007, this would have been my definitive Prime, and I would have accepted no alternatives. Especially since I did before it was time for Earthrise, because he's that damn glorious. Pick him or as many repaints up, you won't regret it. Bayverse Prime has received a lot of figures over the years, and he's probably tied with G1 because of the amount. I'm personally missing ones from 2007 and didn't realize it until I was creating this weekend I'll never get back, so instead of moving on to Animated Prime, I might as well say the Gravity Bot released for the second movie's line is a chunky take on Bay Prime with stumpy proportions, stationary arms, and the only way to convert him is to plop him on his back. His truck mode is definitely a truck, but if you hate when Prime's legs become the back of it with no editing, get ready for no sleep tonight. Look, I don't know what to say, he's one of those non-posable gimmick toys I wish they stopped making in favor of normal figures. You know, something like Dark of the Moon Mech Tech Deluxe Optimus who's missing his gun and a majority of his right foot.
Oh, son of a bitch! What?
Fortunately, unlike Fatimus, my copy had his foot go missing before I found him, and he can somewhat stand on one tippy toe if you find the perfect position, as he's also back heavy. Not a great combo, but it helps that his limbs are made out of 85% clear plastic. His conversion is unforgettable, but a bit clashy. I'm sure his larger counterparts are worse in that regard, however, since this figure is already so small, capturing those big screen details aren't a concern. But the ones you would normally expect are here, like those flames, those super focused eyes that'll cut through any Decepticon in a 24-mile radius. Every truck part and wires are sculpted to perfection, and no gun because, once again, this figure was used. Back on topic, his alt mode is the most realistic Peter Blitt 379 you'll ever get, as the Bay movies famously sacrificed the look of the robot in favor of the vehicles. It being so small, it still has some liberties taken, like the cut down smokestacks, the somewhat visible hands, and for some reason the trailer hitch does have a cut in it, but it can work in certain situations. I'm sure if I succeeded in converting that giant stand-in for insert supersonic boss fight here, then I'd say that has the perfect truck mode for this version of Optimus aside from actual model trucks. However, for what I'm willing to put down in terms of cash, this guy is an alright stand-in. Plus I feel there's a better alt mode for this guy down the road anyway. When I originally bought this thing at a toy convention, I thought I was mainly getting him to fill a spot in this video. Especially since I prefer the Night upgrade from the last two Bay films despite their lack of quality or taste. But after messing around with it more and more and finally getting a version of Last Night Prime, I feel like my mind is starting to shift a bit as I now get the appeal of the 07 Prime design, even though this figure specifically was never part of that line. Again, good job past me. In terms of size discrepancy, the Studio Series incarnation is the better choice for most people. However, because of play factor and oddly reminding me of my childhood despite not owning him until now, like the classics Voyager, Mech Tech is fine enough for me. Legacy Animated Optimus would be a fantastic update if he wasn't too chunky to match with the original animation model. However, that's not to say he's awful, as whatever details he needed are on point, and he remains the only Optimus in my collection without a faceplate. I genuinely hope this stays this way, even if the paint on the face is superb. Out of package, you would have to initially attach his light bar. I hate when this happens. And he could take on foes with his rocket-powered battle axe with an extendable handle. It's a bit heavy for him, as my copy's hands are so loose he can barely keep a good battle pose. You can absolutely fumble him into one, but it doesn't help that his shoulders like popping out if you twist them too much. Transformation takes a bit of getting used to, however, once you get the pattern down, the satisfactory of the arms and legs can't be ignored. The ripped off half of the fire engine is pretty neat as long as you don't realize it screams forklift to the point I'm considering getting the upgrade kit to make him into an actual fire engine. So I no longer have to feel guilty for not buying this overpriced monstrosity and to forget how lazy the feet were during the conversion process. Bringing attention back to the front, I appreciate how the headlights grill an excessive amount of black makes every detail feel like they came off of an ink sheet, despite the show being made in Flash. Unintentionally trippy, is it not? Overall, if you want something that's more accurate to Animated's exact look, then this guy won't do any favors, as the OG figures definitely do a better job at replicating the show's art style. But if you're willing to give him a shot, he won't disappoint. Like I mentioned in the Cybertronian Starscream double feature, Optimus in my opinion is the only good Gamer Edition figure, but even then he still has his issues. None of them being the bulk, because holy crap. If you want to talk about a Space Marine fused with a bumper car, this is what you're talking about. This is a guy you shit talk to on Twitter to the point where you challenge him to a real life fight thinking he's a submissive wreck, only to arrive and realize you left the stove on. Doesn't look exactly like the game model, but this feels like a deviation that works better. He can equip an arm cannon that can only attach to the right arm, a battle axe that splits into multiple parts, helps that it isn't as heavy as Animated Prime, doesn't help that the split looks like this. And the cheapest looking Matrix a bot like him can't hold. Like Gamerscream, the thing that'll make or break this figure for you is the conversion, specifically in the arms, because twisting them so they end up at the bottom shouldn't feel this cumbersome, but the shoulders will bend in the opposite direction from where they're supposed to go. Control-C, Control-V with this back panel, and despite the IDW retool being great in its own right, it shouldn't have been the moment where Hasbro realized Prime's backside is more open than the back door to their own damn factory. His vehicle mode is just as chunky as his bot mode, feels like something that would be powered by coal, and is more cohesive, except for this lazy-ass black hole. Upgrade kits and 3D printers aren't the answer to everything, than Gamerscream. So during this video's long overdue production, apparently the Game Edition is slightly stepping up its game, but after these three jokers I have no desire to engage with them, except for maybe Ratchet. But even with his qualms, I'm always going to give a heartfelt salute to Space Marine Prime. That's quite the number of reinterpretations, and at least 7 more to come. But first, let's take a quick detour back to the G1 design with the tallest Optimus in my collection. Or at least it would be if I didn't cheap out.
You sorry two-timing son of a bitch!
Yeah, this is a downscale knockoff I bought after seeing it in a random YouTube short, as I was fed up with the Earthrise's arm proportions. Now, I'm not sure if this thing was made by a specific company, but if you type in MP10K on eBay, I think the results will speak for themselves. Now, I know there's going to be a small amount of backlash because I have the nerve to showcase this bootleg that's not even the same size as the official, while ignoring genuinely made figures by a small company in the middle of the homeland. For people with that mindset, first off, there's enough room in this world for both original and imitation to coexist, at least until Hasbro and Takara called the sniper on both of them. And second, this is a case where the bootleg feels so good it might as well count as an alternative release. Now, with that said, Prime's first masterpiece, ironically MP1, was alright but a bit off in some detail. His third iteration, MP44, is an overly expensive and engineered massacre I wouldn't be caught dead buying, with a super accurate robot in truck mode. And finally, the man in the middle, the MP10, is one of the most revered figures of all time, for its time. Only because the diecast and the legs can't hold a good kick to save his life. In fact, the legs are the only caveat I have with this figure because the range in his arms rock the hills, and while the head isn't one-to-one with whatever the animators felt like drawing that day, the liberties taken make it so this is the version of Prime's head I think of whenever the character is mentioned. The official version of this guy has a ton of releases, some with him alone, and others with his trailer, roller, and a minifigure of Sparkplug. The knockoff I have comes with none of those things because screw me sold separately, I guess. However, he does come with the second episode exclusive battle axe, a matrix of leadership that can actually light our darkest hour because it can open, a jetpack he still owes Sideswipe a new version of, and finally 2 finger guns because the gun he actually comes with is a rinky-dink piece of shit. As for items exclusive to the knockoff, cause yes, those exist, it comes with 3 heads that aren't the greatest, hence why I forget they exist, a sword that kind of looks like the Star Saber from Prime, but this version of him isn't associated with that. Also, the sellers didn't send that, so what the hell, and Megatron in gun mode that the seller also didn't send. But instead of worrying about parts I was gonna throw into a drawer and forget about within a week, let's take a minute to appreciate a transformation complex yet so simple in nature. The side wheels becoming the robo-size concept is finally done justice, and everything else is what you would expect a flat cab Optimus to have, but incorporates just enough engineering it won't become a panel-heavy mess that's not worth over $500. Take it all in, fellas. That's what a real man's truck look like. Pay no attention to the underwear and the obvious pair of robo-legs, cause the shine and realistic details make themselves an eye feast so grand you think you're in Food Wars, but with trucks. Sorry, I don't know where that came from, but no matter if you pay $100 for an OG, plus whatever price above that for an exclusive repaint, or $60 for an underscale with no other repaints to my knowledge, Masterpiece 10 Optimus Prime will spruce up any display you put him in and is worth every cent. RID 2015 Prime as a character might be a horrible continuation of a Prime that wasn't that good to begin with, but call me that ramjet colored Screamer clone from Animated if I say Warrior Class Prime is a garbage figure, cause he's definitely not. His arm proportions are a bit funky, the arm kibble is less excusable than Classic's Voyager, he only comes with his battle axe, and there had to be a better way to cover this hole. At first glance, you'll think you're missing a panel and you'll have to 3D print one, but let me assure you, all copies are like this if my research is correct. Minor blemishes aside, yes minor cause this hole in truck mode isn't big enough to turn my OCD into orbital bacon when staring at it, his anime-like design is oh so extravagant, and the transformation to said truck mode is one I'll never get tired of, essentially making him a perfect desk toy that takes inspiration from Star Convoy. Absolutely pick him up online or at a toy convention. Just wish his oversized knockoff from Voyager was still available so I don't have to feel guilty for not buying this overpriced baby toy. Back to Bayverse, and like MB10, we have a knockoff that feels just as good, if not a tad better than the official, with a few caveats. The color layout is definitely one reason you should get the supposed counterfeit, as not only the details better match the movie model, but the sword has the pleasure of being silver instead of orange, like Megatron tricked Optimus into believing toy sword laws were gonna be just as strict as toy gun laws out of spite. Okay, so, I actually got this wrong. This is actually a knockoff of the San Diego Comic-Con version of this figure, so in reality it was destined to be better than the retail release, so ignore everything I just said. Also need to mention that, yes, this Megatron is also a knockoff, but I feel like it's one-to-one with the original. This Optimus is a complete overscale. Okay, back to the video as it was originally made. For a figure of his size class, he unfortunately doesn't have much in terms of articulation, but he does have what you expect. I wish he had actual wrist articulation, but without it, he's still capable of slicing any Decepticon retarded enough to sneak up on him in half. Unfortunately, the feet are more floppy than Road Rocket's hips, and this badass looking shield is... Actually, there is no unfortunate for this thing, I just forgot to mention it in the script somewhere. The conversion is intuitively fun. In concept. In the act, however, I'm always concerned these bits on the arms are going to snap off, and the legs are almost on the verge of popping out of their sockets. Not to mention the grill's armatures being loose yet tight at the same time. And at the end of it all, you can either get a perfect final result on the first try, or you can end up with something resembling Prime's corpse in Revenge of the Fallen. So once you're done draining the last of your blood, sweat, and tears trying to tab in every last panel in place, you can now marvel at this killer-looking Western Star 5700 XE with glorious flame decals and a curvy frame that reminds me why I prefer the Knight design. Especially because of how shiny the thing is. It's a damn shame the exhaust pipes and the trailer hitch didn't get the assignment, so that's gonna dock this thing some points, and covering it with the shield isn't gonna help much. This was one of those figures I had on the back of my mind ever since I ignored his presence at a random cent store. Twice. Now that I have him, I can greatly say I no longer need the upcoming Studio series, because it's probably going to have the same perks and issues as this guy minus the obvious bootleg aura. His conversion is a bit finicky when trying to finish it, and the paint, while better than the official figure, is admittedly messy at points. However, if you're watching this in the future where the studio series is more lackluster than anything, then might I suggest picking up the Last Night Voyager, an expensive original, or cheap but just as good knockoff labor. Any Age of Extinction figure, you know, the movie where this design actually originates from, looks like this, so avoid them at all costs. Bravo Class Optimus version 1 is easily authentic second best offerings, and that's not saying much, as I still think Hasbro should abandon the evergreen designs as their corporate aura doesn't align themselves to great physical items. As for the figure itself, he has basic arm rotation that will pop off, hollow legs that are in a constant balancing act, and a model conversion that gives fake parts haters an excuse to scream slurs in their sleep. The truck mode is acceptable. Never thought I prefer the knees as the trailer hitch, but here we are. If you're someone who's less fortunate in life but aren't living in the streets, you won't be disappointed, but there are better options when it comes to cheap single-digit Optimus Prime figures. Bravo Class version 2 isn't one of them because it feels like a one-step changer from Cyberverse that somehow failed in testing, so instead of throwing in the garbage where it belongs, they removed the mechanism and snuck it in the Five Below for a cost that feels better on a mediocre burger. Yeah, that's right, $5, just like the previous version. Some people all over the internet want to debate if Age of the Prime Star Convoy is worth Titan price minus 40, but when you're a figure who has less to almost no paint, articulation, and an admittedly addicting conversion where aforementioned non-posable hands will pop off, making you worse than your predecessor, what business does your dumbass have being $5? The answer, no business. If this thing cost $3 and had a spring gimmick, I would have been nicer, but it doesn't, so avoid. It's all the G1 design minus 4 from here on out, and they're all 90% accurate to the cartoon model. Why only 90? Well, thanks to the nature of Siege's alt modes, Optimus gains a bit of arm kibble, which I like to imagine as emergency cannons when someone is stupid to believe taking away his weirdly shaped ion blaster would disarm him. Other accessories include his lollipop axe, which, unlike other G1-based primes, is held normally. Proportions are impressively shaped to strike any battle pose you want to put him in. And while the head is a little different and the side of it might disgust you if you were unfortunate enough to watch all of Netflix or Cybertron, let me assure you it's a pretty good noggin I hope won't get bastardized. His conversion is more advanced in the fact that there are a lot of panels on the legs, but it's one you can get used to. Not a fan of how the wheels pop out, as the struts could break one day, though it's nice to wonder how a matrix cavity would work if he had one. The vehicle mode is definitely one of the few that'll make you question if this line is truly about space vehicle modes, because it wouldn't take much to wrangle this into an Earth-based truck. However, for what we do have, he gains more front lights for cave trotting, and with a few clicks you could make this into a hover truck, but would you really want to get rid of a splendid roller? Yeah, I didn't think so. Overall, Siege Optimus is an underrated figure that's also an acquired taste. If he were the only Optimus in my life, I would have done everything in my power to get rid of these polarizing weapons, but everything else is fantastically engineered and it's an easy recommendation. However, for those not a fan of panel-heavy conversions or the alt mode aesthetic, Earthrise Optimus Prime is one of those figures that was beyond well-loved when it was first released, but as time went on and his job was successfully circumvented by a rookie in the first hour of the first day of employment, that same aberration he once gotten had been melted into a horrifying... Yeah, he's alright. The Siege was definitely accurate to the G1 cartoon in certain parts, however the Earthrise is even more accurate as the arm kibble's gone, and the back has been significantly cleaned up so we can equip Sideswipe's jetpack. He still hasn't returned! I guess having squashed proportions and the same head as the Siege but cheaper is the perfect form of karma. I joke about the limbs, but their shortness is a major flaw I wish I noticed sooner. The posing isn't terrible, but it could look a lot better, especially compared with figures released before him. As for accessories not from other characters, he comes with a much better looking ion blaster that can compact, help that it's way better than the MP10s, and a trailer with a repair drone but no roller unless you had money around the release of this guy in silver. Oh, and by the way, this silver box on wheels is the reason this Voyager is leader price. Suffer! Although not really, because the conversion is a toned-down version of the Siege Primes, and is honestly the closest of truck-based Optimus transformation is on equal footing with Grandpa Battle Convoy. It just comes at the cost of the grille being fake and the legs losing everything that allowed them to become a coherent shape. With that being said, the look of truck mode, especially with the trailer attached, feels a bit squished, but shouldn't be unfamiliar to those who spent every weekday after school at 4 p.m. Eastern Time looking at it or the real-life equivalent. Side windows are a bit iffy, yet it's not the worst I've seen. Yes, Ironhide, I am talking about you. So in a half a decade after his initial release, Earthrise Optimus is an alright figure that definitely hasn't aged the best thanks to lackluster proportions, and a trailer, while cost-worthy in concept, feels like an upcharge excuse, especially when half of his repaints don't have it. For something with such huge issues, he was the de facto Optimus Prime for a while, and the mostly positive reception can attest to that, as whatever negative you can throw at it is easily countered with one of his positives and vice versa. In a world where Elton Prime doesn't exist, no one would complain if this was the final Optimus ever released, but he could be a lot better. Being the first return to Legend-size figures since the Prime Wars trilogy, Kingdom Core Class Optimus kinda feels like a missing link, before that was a concept, of the reveal the Shield's Legends Optimus, as whatever detail had to be cut because of size isn't enough to diminish the overall aesthetic. You could make an argument about the head, but it's legit the size of my pinky nail. His articulation, while basic, has just enough range to make any pose look dynamic, and the conversion doesn't stray away from what any normal Optimus would do, just having an ass flap for the front wheels and the head being a slight but not infuriating pain to get back out when going back to bot mode. The truck is a truck. Hinges are okay at imitating windows, and big ugly front hinge won't destroy your guts. If you're wondering why the back half is made out of feet, welcome to the Transformers fanbase where things like this are normal to us. This guy is definitely the little brother that wants the same acknowledgement as his Voyager-sized, don't care, Voyager-sized counterparts, but because of his status as a small budget-friendly Prime who isn't the size most collectors want him to be, he sat on store pegs while a re-release of Earthrise Prime were bought like hotcakes. Luckily for him, he's been re-released and repainted a few times, and the best part is that they're fairly recent. So if you have a Target who hasn't updated their toy aisles within the last 8 months, you should be able to find him in regular or Nemesis flavor. $10 is a sweet deal for this baby semi, and is another piece that represents the start of a new engineering style that hasn't gone away since.
Excuse me, what the actual you're doing in my house?
Holiday Optimus Prime, or Santa Prime if you speak fanfiction. However, this guy was released in 2 colors. One being a Pulse exclusive until it wasn't, and the other being an Amazon exclusive you can still find to this day. Their articulation is similar to the Earthrise again, to the point where they have the same trailer and gun. However, you flat out need toy hacks for the Santa Prime's trailer, as it's super plain without them, and the gun is as fragile as actual candy canes. Even with those caveats, I still prefer the look of the Santa suit as opposed to the normal red and blue with that huge button and tasty green windows. His conversion stands out without being messy. The way everything slots in feels so magical, it reveals detail you wouldn't expect from a toyetic truck that's definitely taking no inspiration from G2 Hero Prime. Yep, haven't thought about 3D printing a missile launcher compartment for this guy at all. Though to be fair, this part specifically made for this figure to carry the trailer is doing its job mostly well. His mirrors are thick enough so they won't snap like you're back at the end of a Christmas Eve rush, and despite being a mid to late 2022 figure, he hasn't yellowed, unlike certain examples.
Bruh.
Holiday Optimus Prime / Santa Prime is no doubt a solid pickup for your holiday season, as his unique but similar quality is something that shouldn't be slept on. For those who don't celebrate Christmas specifically, the normal red and blue version is still on Amazon for a worthwhile price. Next up, 2 figures so small and simple I might as well talk about their entire sets, because after this I'm never going to acknowledge them again. Just playing Prixio. Yeah, let's go with that. Just Play and Prixio are one of the many companies that specializes in making cheaper items for some of the major toy companies of America. Their most notable product, especially for Just Play, are tiny figurines you can only find at Dollar Tree, Five Below, and any other budget retail store. Now, because all of these are in static poses and have no joints to speak of, I can only judge them on looks, value, and right off the bat there's a clear winner. Yes, already. I may prefer the dynamic poses on the Just Play, but not only does it abandon Grimlock, all the figures have one missing paint detail in major areas. At face value, this problem is easy to look past, except the Prixio set fills in those areas the JP skipped out on even though they're smaller.
Unacceptable! Unacceptable!
Prime and Soundwave shows this off perfectly as JP Prime skips out on the window booths for no reason even though you could have used the light blues from the eyes. And Soundwave looks like a sprite from an early unlicensed NES game while the Prixio feels like one of my many simplifications. JPB and Megs are missing out on one specific detail that the Prixio fills in, but unlike Prime's window tits, they're noticeable but insignificant. Both Screamers are damn near identical with a few back exceptions. And finally, Grimlock being exclusive to the Prixio set feels like the Dino Mode animation was ripped off the screen, though his hands feels like razor blades. Overall, if there was one set where the Prixio's paint budget combined with the Just Play size and poses, we could have had some of the best Transformers figurines out in the wild. However, since we don't, I personally wouldn't buy either of these sets again if the opportunity presents itself, because I'm strictly an articulation guy. But if I had to, the Prixio would always get a few cents out of me. Unfortunately, in terms of availability, I think the Prixio set is discontinued because every time I go to Dollar Tree, I could only find the Just Play set. It's certainly alright for what it is, but knowing what cheapness can do at a smaller scale makes me feel like I've been ripped off more than if I bought these things for anything higher than $1.25. At this point, I can't tell you what to do with your pocket change, so in terms of the JP, there are apparently two versions to look out for. One with a bonus card and one without, so hey, that might be worth something. But no, really, if you pay anything above $1.25 for these or others like them, just throw your bank information at the nearest stranger. Your ass deserves to be broke. Next up? Oh, you gotta be kidding me. Another company that specializes in making cheaper products for the bigwigs of the toy industry, though compared to Just Play and Prixio, their cheapness is higher end, sort of. Forever Clever and their pullback racers Optimus Prime. I don't like the look of this thing. At all. If he was just the truck with an exposed head, he'd be the type of silly I could admire. But thanks to this ginormous pimple that's supposed to be his arm, it just makes the whole thing fall off harder than doing live commentary after doing scripted for half of your life. Also, was there a reason for this hand rotation that could have been beneficial to the head? This is essentially a pullback car. If you've had at least 52 of these in your life, you know how they work. However, for the iPad kids, you just place it on a flat surface, pull it back, and watch it go. I prefer to do this to give him more speed, even though every licensed researcher tells me I shouldn't. Overall, this is a good and inexpensive way to keep your 5-year-old and his friends busy, but if you're looking for a pullback truck that's more cohesive, then there are definitely 1,000 better options out there in the world. For those who don't want such a tacky looking thing, such a mechanism, and just wants it to be smaller, unfortunately that's not what she said, then there's no better option than Hot Wheels Track Fleet Optimus Prime. A die-cast vehicle so good looking I refuse to take it out of the packaging. Okay, what's that noise? No, now how am I supposed to sell this on eBay for double the price times 57? If you know what a Hot Wheels toy is, then congratulations! You have the knowledge that this is a die-cast small-scale version of Prime's alt mode that's the most perfect looking you could ever get, with the trailer being a bit loose and can't open and fit other cars, but rolls phenomenally. It'd be cool if I had the transforming version, but remembering what I heard about Mattel Creations, yeah, beggars can't be choosers. And unfortunately, like the Mattel Creations, he's not as easy to find as when I first got him. So if you can find this as is, without the gray box or Doom or as Magnus, don't hesitate to grab him as your Transformers as Hot Wheels collection will be without a leader. Give scalpers the finger, that goes without saying. Smash Changer's Optimus Prime is confusing. Sometimes it's a fun monolith of stress-relieving violence, and at others it's an example of me being claymored by the QC fairy. He only has basic arm bends, and the conversion would be fine if everything didn't spring out constantly. The sculpt of his head matches super well with the screen model, and I find the military transport truck to be the best part of this contraption. I kind of wish this was his alt mode in the movie. It matches perfectly with his brooding douchebag personality. Transforming him back requires you to slam the vehicle on the floor while pushing this button at the same time. Slam it too softly and one panel kicks up. Do it too hard and you'll probably break the figure. The button also has the ability to lock up on occasion, so keep that in mind while slamming. Since Rise of the Beast was a mediocre movie with a mediocre toy line where a majority of it was gimmick toys, I'm sure you can find this thing on clearance if you or someone in your life has extreme anger issues. ROTB also gave us a converting mask line, but didn't think to make an Optimus until Transformers 1. A movie that wasn't mediocre, but the toy lines, with the exception of the Prime Changers, are still things I would never allow in my collection unless a relative, friend, or just somebody close to me buys me it as a gift. On that note, a figure I wouldn't have normally unless a relative, friend, or somebody close to me buys it for me as a gift without me asking. Mask Prime in robot mode can be described as super funky with a head that's reminiscent of the Power Master's default cab, arm articulation that's hindered by the head strap, hollow legs that are surprisingly sturdy unless you put it on a turntable.
That was a lie.
And finally, shoulder-mounted antenna cannon so he can pick up the Jets game on the radio or shoot your ass. Conversion is super clunky, especially with the strap getting in the way. Not to mention how every panel is on some kind of weak bolt or armature. Overall, it's a process for a robot mode that's not worth it, cause at the end of the day, you're buying this for a Prime face that's basically Prime's face with an off-model crest thanks to it emulating what would be Prime's normal stomach. Now this was obviously made with small children in mind, but even then I still suggest you pop the feet off cause they don't feel comfortable. And this is optional, but taking off the arms will give you a better silhouette. And after getting rid of the pimples holding this thing's true potential back, you have a semi-perfect Optimus Prime mask, you don't need me to explain how a head strap works, for your expensive cosplay, trick-or-treating, and of course, this nonsense.
Pepperoni salami sandwich. In my 41 years on this earth, I've heard sandwiches are some of the best food on this planet, along with pizza. And burgers. And donuts. Look, this is the first thing I'm trying. I heard from an associate that this is so good it could pass through a faceplate. Well, time to test that theory. How cheesy that is. Alright, let's dig in.
For collectors, this is as much as a display piece as that Matrix I wish I can find. Cosplayers probably have better and expensive options, but for ones that are on a strict budget or children, this is a fine enough option as long as you don't convert it. Comparing two figures from a movie that didn't get the respect it deserved because of crap marketing? What could possibly go wrong? Everything in between, but we're jumping the shareable gun. Studio Series 112 and Prime Changer's Optimus looks like the upgraded form of the humble miner. However, it doesn't feel like Optimus Prime. Double S-112's bulk screams I've been blown up and rebuilt to combat the new Decepticon threat, but the head is absolutely giving me a kawaii vibe that doesn't match well with the color filter or the implication of what this guy is supposed to represent. Pair that with the posability mixed in with the bottom half, and he feels like he's ready to buy thigh-high socks and a mini skirt. Ripping off the actual skirt may have 0% helped the look, but it was super floppy and useless during the conversion process. Also, it didn't help that it made the figure feel and look like it developed a dirty diaper fetish. Yes, I know the wheel hinges are wrong, but they look terrible the way they're supposed to be. The Prime Changer isn't very much better in the look like Optimus Prime agenda, yet he has much better proportions and it wouldn't take a lot to customize this into a post-COG Orion Pax. They both come with flamethrower exhaust pipes, these aren't real accessories, a matrix of leadership which are cut and held in very intuitive ways, and a battle axe. The one for my definitive Orion Pax looks like it's being spit out of his hands, while the muscly twink goes for a generic light peg cover. Neither of their conversions are as bad as I thought they were originally, but I still wouldn't do them for fun, this ain't your mom. Double S112 is a tad bit better in terms of clearances, while at the same time these stupid hands don't want to grab onto these pegs and you really have to squish the armatures to hell and back. In contrast, the Prime Changer feels simpler, but everything doesn't have the clearance they should, and the rooftop really wanted to become a parts forming piece but was so upset that it wasn't, it started rebelling. While the Prime Changer is getting points taken away for this, the final result straight up blasts his competition like he's D16 finally being fed up with society's BS. Now to the naked eye, these Cybertrucks are vaguely similar, but let's be real here, the muscly twink is a junkyard collage that isn't going to help stop the Cybertronian yoga pose slander anytime soon, thanks to them failing to hold on to these leg pegs for dear life. Versus young Optimus, if you prepare for 2020 centuries early, is a more cohesive vehicle that feels like an alt mode Cup would use in his pre-Records days, thanks to his arms folding up in a way that makes the whole thing feel like a pickup truck. No, I'm not adding this broken toenail of a parts warming piece because it looks just as bad with it than without it, and the fact that this has nowhere to go in robot mode makes the overall package feel worse than it already is. As figures, they both wear their pros and cons like gloves, but it's pretty clear who's pulling the weight. Prime Changer's conversion is 50% worse compared to the Studio series, however he's absolutely trashing Double S112 in terms of looks for robot and vehicle mode. If you can find the Prime Changer and can look past the borderline annoying transformation, he's worth the pickup. If you can only find the Double S112 because he was part of an initiative to overstock a version of a popular character, I don't think you'll regret the purchase, but you might have to strip him down in order to make him feel tolerable. Wait, I didn't mean it like that! Studio Series 86 Optimus Prime. To say this figure's looks in proportion and annihilates every Optimus, especially the Earthrise into the ground, would be an understatement. So judging him on his own, with the exception of a backpack that won't allow him to borrow Sideswipe's jetpack, yeah, he's a dead ringer for the cartoon model with a head that's too round to match with it or the movie, but fantastic enough to make it feel like it wasn't animated by Season 3 ACOM. Posability for this thing is cooked to perfection. Every bend feels comfortable and every joint is fine-tuned. Just wish my copy's right leg would stop doing the splits and you would have to cheat for deeper arm bends. In terms of weaponry, he comes with this skinny but ever so iconic ion blaster, a trailer that makes the 89 bucks feel complete unlike the Earthrise because it feels super sturdy, has secret compartments, a repair drone with a super arm that can combine with Roller, who's not sold separately and is just as adorable as you would want him to be, and finally, the MP10 KO's axe, because the axe he actually comes with isn't as bad as the MP10's gun, it's just that all the men in my life have told me girls like it big. I don't think they were talking about axes. So, quick tangent, back when this guy was first leaked and the only images we had to go off of was this thing that was obviously faked looking back, I could imagine a figure with the MP10's looks, the Siege Prime's proportions and articulation, and most importantly, the Earthrise Prime's conversion level. We're 2 out of 3 so far, and the streak is coming to a dramatic halt because the transformation could have been a lot better, but at the same time, you'd probably catch me transforming this for the 80th time that day than the 86 Cup or God forbid the MP44 once. The main issue is having to keep track of the smaller details, especially in the legs, and the way the side panels work always scares me into thinking I'm going to break them. Even with those problems, it's still a fun and intuitive transformation that leaves you feeling accomplished once everything for this beast of a flat truck is in place. The silver stripe has been passed down to each generation of G1 Optimus. This guy rejects that tradition thanks to his undying loyalty to the cartoon model. Helps that he rolls like nothing else matters, and thanks to his trailer, the Ultimo looks just as phenomenal as the bot and can perform devastation-type super attacks. Now, I could mention the issues brought by the looseness of the exhaust pipes, the matrix chamber being unpainted, and the back of the feet being misassembled, though in order to compensate, I only have 2 words to say about things like this. Those words being,
Who cares?
Things like that should be blown away like a bug on your pinky toe. Things like that are the equivalent of your least favorite celebrity's political opinions. Things like that shouldn't determine the enjoyment this figure brings to the table, because they don't. Sure, there are a few problems personal to me, like certain parts of the conversion and roller being silver instead of blue, but again, they're insignificant. The road Hasbro and Takara went on to get an Optimus Prime figure this perfect was a long but smooth one, and if this video doesn't showcase this fact, well, I'm not sure what to say. All I know is if either of them wants to feel like Scrooge McDuck, they'll make as many repaints and re-releases as they can. No doubt they're being developed as we speak, so if you want the best Optimus Prime money can get you and third party isn't an option, I can't recommend Studio Series 86 Optimus Elton Prime enough. He's truly something special. Well, there you have it. Every figure of Optimus Prime I've ever received or bought throughout the years, including Siege Magnus, plus the entire Prixio and Just Play sets. Deciding which one of these are the overall best would be a challenge thanks to their charmingly diverse nature, even for ones with the same design philosophy. Looks are easy to judge, however in a world like this, transformation will determine your place on the rating cycle. Those who don't pose or convert will be judged differently, as Hot Wheels Prime is a super shiny and perfect mini flat nose versus the Gravity Bot, which is a heavily stylized Peterbilt. GB should surpass the HW cause he converts in an addicting fashion, but not everyone's going to be a fan of the back half and he needed hand rotation to do so. Pullback Racers Prime needed his arm taken away in order to look better. The only thing he has going for him is the pullback function, even if there are better looking options if that's what you desire. If you desire non-posing statues of robot mode, then there are a bunch of better options, official or unofficial, because you can barely find Prixio Prime for a decent price nowadays, and you're going to have to fill in the Just Play Prime's details yourself. Prixio scales better with Hot Wheels Prime, but unfortunately he also scales well with dog food, so yeah, don't play with this on the floor. Authentics 2.0 can convert as well and would have been in the middle, if he didn't look like a small OG Armada Prime with the Just Play's non-existent paint budget while also being charged the same price as Milk in 2025. Now that you have perspective, you can avoid this thing at all costs, just like how you should avoid a junker truck whose combining function is rendered unusable without a friend, and whose limbs consist of brittle clear plastic, so he can no longer stand if you dare click it 2.6% faster than you would normally do. This bastard needed a Prime Force and he needed it badly. Game Edition, Optimus would have gone into the next portion of the cycle if his falling addicted arm didn't make the transformation worse than it already is, and if the rest of the subline didn't represent a game most people can't legally get anymore. Classics Deluxe is a floppy mess and can't stay in vehicle mode to save his life. However, since his conversion isn't as annoying as our last entry, he gets to start off the tolerables in style, that I'd rather be playing with the Voyager style. It's super hard for me to trash a GIF, so the meanest thing I'll say is the transformation isn't a bad endeavor, but the bot mode isn't worth the hassle. Still a good looking mask, only being surpassed by Majora's Corrupted Nutsack. I'm fully aware it's a late 80s toy, but Power Master Prime requires you to have all of his components, especially the Super Mode head and Gen High Q, to fully admire him. There's a semblance of a fun figure here, however, unless you're willing to go treasure hunting, the Titans Return, or dare I say the Masterpiece, are the better options. Studio Series 112 was overstocked and has a better chance at being on store shelves. With that said, you should still get the Prime Changer over it because of the better proportions, even with a slightly worse conversion. On the other hand, the Smash Changer succeeds in looking like an Optimus I can't stand with basic armbands. The transformation and gimmick does indeed work, however, everyone around and especially below you won't be amused by the constant banging on the floor. The Last Night KO has the better looks and proportions, while the Legacy Nemesis has the slightly more enjoyable conversion. However, since they both excel in accessories, except for this axe, and the fact that they're murderous psychopaths, they're fine being in a tie together. Or not, cause one of them is literally a Decepticon depending on the continuity. Siege Galaxy Upgrade Prime is not the version of this specific iteration most people want. However, it's the version a lot of people still let go by the wayside, which is a damn shame. Aside from a few clearance issues and these damn shoulder guards, this figure is pretty easy to recommend along with the guy he was retooled from, cause clipping on the armor is super satisfying. Not satisfying enough to get him into the next tier, but satisfying nonetheless. Speaking of which, I'm genuinely surprised Authentics version 1 managed to not show up on the board until now. Probably due to the fact that it slowly grew on me as version 2 showed me what the value of money really is, or the idea of a truck grill hood is funny AF. Still not enough to get him past low respectable, but bro thinks he needs to give up everything to be part of the team, even though enough people can confirm he didn't. Two of those guys being Siege and Santa Prime. We have another tie because the Siege has the worst looking weapons, even though St. Nicholas the Robot plagiarized his. Both have parts in the conversion that aren't bad, but makes me not want to perform them often. But they style like champions know how to because of their coloring and posing potential. Legacy Animated Prime has no face and some parts that expose a bit of jank, but his conversion is slightly better than the last two combatants and looks immaculate. MechTech Prime, on the other hand, has the straight up better transformation. Ignoring the missing foot that's not a clear plastic sin, he's everything a fan of the 07 movie design would want at a small but reasonable scale. Not to mention the color, the studio series looks kind of mute, I'm sorry. And the best part is, he's shockingly still available at BBTS, meaning I could have had one with an axe gun and a fixed foot. Huh. I mean, he's a 14-year-old inbox figure for $25. Opening him up is your choice, and it's damn sure gonna be mine. Legacy G1 Toy Prime is a fantastic alternative to the missing link for those whose budgets only go into the triple digits. However, thanks to a few tolerance issues, the original Generation 1 is going to edge over his somewhat flexible grandson. Plus, unlike his upgrade form, he doesn't need all its parts to appreciate him as a display piece. Now, these next two could be another tie, but I'll be honest, Spy Changer Scourge is just too adorably evil to not give him the leg up. The Kingdom Core Prime's truck mode looks too much like it rolled out of an extra parts bureau, and the gun could easily walk out to buy milk and never come back, but now I'm just stretching to find real negatives. Just like how I'm gonna do with the top 6, which is really the top 3 because they're that damn good. Earthrise Prime should be in the middle of respectful. Seriously, this man has stubby arms, a poorly painted face, an inflated price tag thanks to this paperweight disguised as a cargo box, and his transformation is genuinely the only thing carrying him to success. Hence why he's sharing a spot with the MP10 on official or bootleg capacity, especially with those proportions. Sure, the MP10's legs are atrocious and my copy overall is falling apart in certain places, but nothing integral to the figure's well-being. You know, like the feet! And how about their overall sculpts? Once you think it can't get any better, the MP44 fails that task so hard it's up to Marclonus & Co. to make this design right. And make it right they did, because Studio Series 86 Optimus Prime is sharing a spot with Legacy Armada Prime because they're unintentional mirror universe versions of each other. Legacy Armada Prime is a rocking Goliath with a lackluster posing core robot, and the absolute best trailer in 5 years that's also a better combiner than the traditional definition. No, seriously, we don't need no stinking skeletons, throw that crap in the closet where it belongs. Compared to 86 Prime, who rightfully takes baby daddy status away from Needle Nose and posability, but has a trailer 50% of people won't appreciate because the main bot is just so badass. See what I mean? Okay, but just in case you still don't, if someone were to ask me to buy either of them as a gift, I'd have no choice but to buy both of them, effectively making my bank account only single digits for a while, cause they complement each other in unexpected ways. Everyone deserves them both equally. Just like how everyone deserves a version of Classic's Voyager Prime because of his mind-blowing weapons, if you're not lazy like me, and a guitar-shredding transformation that's fantastic for newcomers and veterans who have less time to engage with the second place entries. Helps that he costs a lot less depending on where you get him from. So even without the perfect Optimus shape, Transformers Classics Voyager Optimus Prime, with or without his weapons, is tied with Robots in Disguise Warrior Class Optimus Prime as the perfect Optimus Prime in my eyes. What in the sacrilege? A figure from one of the most mediocre kid-oriented lines based on the most annoying Transformers show of all time is the perfect Optimus Prime? How in the bear in the big blue hell does that work? That's how. Enough said. In conclusion, if you're in the mood for a physical representation of this six-wheeled icon, whether he be a goofy yet gold-hearted mining bot, a battle-ready soldier, a face-ripping psychopath, or an unintentional father of a decade, you can always assume you're going to get something worth your time and money, as Optimus Prime is definitely one of those characters that surpass the popularity of his own franchise. 10% of the time you'll no doubt run into a few stinkers. However, for the other 90, what real choice does Takara, Hasbro, anyone else they collaborate with, or heck, even third party have than giving him the best figure he truly deserves? With all that being said, if you have an Optimus Prime figure I didn't showcase for the simple fact that I don't own it, let's talk about it in the comments below. And if you were able to endure my deep yet cringy voice for this long and you haven't already, then I hope you consider pressing the like and subscribe buttons, as you wouldn't want to miss out on my honest-to-God opinions. I'm fully aware a lot of new Optimus figures got revealed, and there are a few holy grails I wish I had to showcase, but those are going to be stories for future me to tell. So many dates skipped and so many broken opportunities, but hey, at least I got this out before GTA 6. Thank you all so much for watching, being patient, and until next time, may whatever time or place treat you well.